Well, hello there and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Hunter Braxton's Questions for Atheists addendum. He released 10 questions for atheists last year, and he's sort of added or clarified some questions, so we're going to take a look at the new one. I haven't responded to those old 10 questions yet, but I intend to. So, but I'm just going to do this video first because it's a little shorter, and I wanted to try out a new sort of format for Fundie Sundays. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure if Braxton is a fundamentalist or not, but he is conservative, Christian, anti-gay. I think he's anti-gay. I would characterize his opinions as all fundamentalist. So, yeah, let's just dive into it.
Last year, I made a video, 10 Questions for Atheists. That's in a playlist that has 12 episodes as I listened to what atheists said and then interacted with that. There were a lot of responses, and I still get responses to this day from that video. Now, admittedly, there were some things in that video that might have been tongue-in-cheek, but I genuinely wanted to hear the answers to those questions. Quite a few atheists seemed to appreciate that I was trying to understand their positions in a greater way, but many still didn't think my questions were genuine. A lot of people also thought that I was too wordy for the question to come out in a precise way. So here I'm asking these questions as simply and concisely as I possibly can and without any snark whatsoever. I genuinely want to know the answers to these questions. Question 1. If you have a deconversion story from any...
Well, let's pause it first. He admits that the first video was quite snarky, which I would I mean, it wasn't quite snarky. There was a little bit of snark in there, which I would back up. It was a little annoying. I've seen some of it, but not the whole thing. So I'll have mostly a fresh take when I finally tackle that one, but it's a lot longer.
World religion. Question 1. If you have a deconversion story from any world religion, would you mind sharing that story? If you grew up in a non-religious household, what was it like to experience being around other people who were raised religious?
It was... I was raised in a non-religious household, but I was always told to respect religion. But it was weird. Let's see. What was the graphic he used? What worldview were you raised with? Well, I wasn't raised with a worldview. Specifically, they told me to kind of figure things out on my own in my own way. My parents did. They didn't really teach me what to think. So I've never heard the word worldview ever in my life until I started watching theist YouTubers or theist debaters. The definition of a worldview is the fundamental cognitive orientation of an individual or society encompassing the whole of the individual's or society's knowledge and point of view. Now, I don't really have any view that encompasses everything except for the view that there's reality and there's reality. Something exists. It's not like an atheist worldview. It doesn't encompass the whole of my reality. Believe it or not, atheism does not consume my life. And it doesn't encompass everything I believe. In fact, the things I believe that most strongly, the things that I'm working on that I'm most excited about, which is a objective model of morality, is compatible with both atheism and theism. And that's done purposely, although it's not compatible with divine command theory, at least. So the question, the way the question is worded on screen is, what worldview were you raised with? I wasn't. I was raised with the notion of loving your family and respecting other people. That's pretty much the most all-encompassing thing that I wasn't even taught. See, I was taught find your own way, basically, and don't be evil. But is that all-encompassing, really? The closest to all-encompassing thing that I believe is in logic or in fact and basically the scientific method, which doesn't itself comment inherently on the theism-atheism debate. So I really don't like this worldview. It's just too stringent for me. And everything I believe is kind of compartmentalized, not in the sense that I can hold two conflicting things at the same time, because I believe cognitive dissonance is really bad. But so all my beliefs I try to make compatible with one another, but there's no overarching thing other than that they need to be compatible with reality. Is realityism a worldview? That there's truth and that there's falsehood? If so, that's my worldview. But he also asked, what was it like being raised around religious households? I thought they were weird. I thought it was weird that they went every Sunday to get preached at. I didn't really know what they believed. I knew they believed in a God and kind of a heaven thing, but the fact that he was so absent from my life and really from their lives, other than going to church, was a real indictment of the thing, even when I was young and didn't really realize much. So the fact that God was only a part of someone's life if an adult taught them, and he was completely absent from my life, meant that he was completely disinterested in me if he did exist, which was not compatible with my idea of God. So I didn't put much stock in the idea. I knew false religions existed. Why would this one be any different? Because this God had no effect on my life. If he's going to abandon me to the world just because some adults didn't tell me about him, well, that's evidence that he doesn't exist. And I knew that as a child.
To experience being around other people who were raised religious. Question number 2. Is there anything that Christian apologists or philosophers bring that you actually do consider to be good evidence for God? And if not...
Nope, not a single thing. Not even a little bit. Not even like an infinitesimal amount. None. Nada. Zilch. Just the closest thing they have is personal experience, which is nothing because it could be a hallucination, and every other religion on earth has this. So you have nothing that they don't have, which you consider, if you consider it as a Muslim to have had a personal experience with God, that would be a delusion because it's not your religion. So by your own standards, you have nothing.
Not, how do you consider to be good evidence for God? And if not, how do you define evidence?
Evidence is facts or body of facts that are indicative or exclusively concordant with some proposition. And it's not my definition. This is what's so weird. What is your definition of evidence? Well, there's this thing called a dictionary, and you can go look up what the definition of a word is. And I know. I do the same thing. I'll admit. I ask people, especially like when you know that a word is going to be controversial, you want to ask someone what they mean by it. But I'm just mad that this conversation even has to take place because there is a dictionary. It shouldn't be something where people don't have the same idea about a word because we can look up what the word it means. And yes, I know words can change, but it only matters if the usage of a word changes, if it changes on a wide scale. And as soon as that happens, well, it only matters because it only matters if it changes on a wide scale because that's how words work. If it's not intelligible to the majority of people, then it's pretty much a useless word. I mean, you can have specific usages within certain contexts that some people don't get, but some people do get. Yes, I know. But even then, if everyone within a certain community doesn't understand the word to mean what it means, it's useless. It has to be widely understood. And as soon as it's widely understood to mean something else, you bet the dictionary is going to be on it. So dictionaries are very useful tools. They are not prescriptive. They are entirely descriptive. And just because you should use the definition in the dictionary, that's not a prescriptive statement. It's a statement of, it's describing this is how the word is used. So if you use it differently, you are not communicating. So anyway, evidence is a body of facts that are indicative or exclusively concordant with some proposition. That's it. Now, how do we test that? The scientific method is the best way.
Straightforwardly, and if not, how do you define evidence?
Okay, so I mean, is there any evidence for God? No, because there is no body of facts that are exclusively concordant with the proposition of God exists, because that proposition is unfalsifiable. So literally all facts are concordant with God. By their view, there's nothing that would convince them because it's unfalsifiable. Any body of facts, they'll find a way to fit it in. And that's why it's not even an explanation or a model. This God did it because it doesn't matter what the data says, they'll fit it in anyway. So it's so stupid. And there's nothing even, so that would be very strong evidence. Weak evidence would be just a weak indication. Well, there's absolutely nothing even weakly indicating that a God or a creator exists. And there's plenty of indications against it, like that every single religion on earth, except one, is false. So why is there an exception when they have just equally as crazy beliefs? Yeah. And there's no every weak indication of a creator, like, where did the universe come from? Where did life come from? It's all based on fallacies. So it may be true, but we have no evidence. We have no valid conclusions that we can rely upon toward that premise.
For God? And if not, how do you define evidence? Straightforwardly, I'm a dog person. Here's my dog, Indiana. Dogs, cats, both, or neither.
Why is this a question for atheists? I mean, dog, obviously. But, is this him being like trying to do a meme or something? Like, what does this have to do with anything? Consequently, a dog, when I look into my dog's eyes, I see more love, more purpose, more meaning in those little eyes than I've ever experienced from anything in the Bible, from any lecturer, from any mass that I've been to. I went to a Christian school for 4 years. Any church, any preacher, nothing has come close to what's in those little eyes. The relationship, the intelligence behind it. And I don't mean behind her creation, but in the what's going on behind the eyes. Right? Dogs are much better people than people. And yes, I do consider dogs to be persons. They have personhood rights, unlike some animals that we can eat. Yeah, I think dogs represent everything that fails with Christianity. They have more love in them than their God ever will. And I see all of my evolutionary history written in that dog's eyes. I know we aren't descended from dogs, but we are from mammals. We're both from mammals. And I see more in common with that little dog than I do with anything to do with any religion. There's more to be learned from your relationship with a little pupper than there is from the entirety of the Bible. And you can do that just by interacting in the real world. You don't need special revelation. You don't need someone to come teach you and tell you what to believe about it. You just live it. Okay. Dog, 100%. I'm warming up to cats, but dogs all the way.
Did Jesus exist as a single historical individual?
Probably not. There probably was a single historical Jesus, but I bet everything I have that at least some other aspects were attributed to this historical individual from other historical individuals or mythical individuals. And not just adding mythical attributions onto the historical person, but taking attributions from other mythical and historical individuals who already existed and mashing them together. However, I do believe there is one probably primary figure in history that was a Jewish, I guess, prophet, cult leader who essentially created Christianity and was probably killed, probably crucified. Yeah.
And if so, how reasonable do you think it is for people to hold the position that Jesus did not exist?
Extremely reasonable. like beyond reasonable. I don't think that the facts indicate it, but without those facts, I think it's a very reasonable position, because we know that prophets in religions are mythical and are inspired by mythical events and can be invented whole cloth, like Moses. That's pretty much confirmed that he was an amalgamation of many people, either real and imagined, the compilation of myths. So, given basic knowledge of all other religions that you accept, it's very reasonable to believe the same of your Messiah. Yours is no different. It just so happens that there probably was some guy that really established a Jewish reform. So what? That doesn't mean he was right. That doesn't mean he was God. Doesn't mean he was resurrected. There was a guy named Muhammad. That's way more well established than Jesus. Like, infinitely more well established in history. So, it is at least a little reasonable, but I don't think, given all the facts, it's reasonable to hold that there was absolutely no Jesus, that he was invented whole cloth. So, yeah, I'm a little bit in between on that question.
Of your Christian friends and family members, which one would stand the best chance of convincing you or persuading you than the others? Even if you think none of them stand a chance of convincing you, Christian friends and family members, which people to hold the position that Jesus did not exist? Of your Christian friends and family members, which one would stand the best chance of convincing you or persuading you than the others? Even if you think none of them stand a chance, some stand more of a chance than others, right? Who would that be?
What? Why are you asking me who of my family? How does that bear any relevance to anything? That's the genetic fallacy. It doesn't matter who it comes from. It matters what their argument is. And there are no good Christian arguments. I don't really talk about religion with much of my family, and a lot of my family are agnostics or atheists. And those who aren't, it's not really a topic of discussion. Religion has never been an issue in my family. I just see it as a problem in the world. I don't have any family members who have ever tried to push it on me. Yeah, it's a dumb question, though. I don't get it. I'm gonna have to say none, because I don't... If I picked one at random, it would be just at random, because I know they believe in God, but I've never really had a strong discussion with them, because you don't do politics and religion at the family dinner table. Sorry, dude. I pretty much save those debates for online people who I know are going in to debate that. I don't really debate it with my friends either. I either come to find out that I know they're an atheist, and yeah, we'll make fun of religion together. Or, I mean, I just don't talk about it outside of the YouTube sphere, really.
And why? What's your favorite film or television series?
Favorite film? The Return of the Jedi, probably, because I just really like the idea that, and this is present in The Lord of the Rings as well, that evil is self-defeating, and all you have to do is hold to the good path, and evil will take itself out. So because Luke Skywalker held to his principles, he would not kill his father. He would not become his father by giving in to the hate and taking the shortcut to power. He becomes his father. And he broke that cycle, and Darth Vader took out the Emperor. Lord of the Rings is a little less about the triumph of good and more about the self-defeating nature of evil. Good just, it's like you just endure, you just hold on until evil defeats itself. And of course Gollum's lust for the ring is what destroyed the ring in the end. Because Frodo could not do it. It wasn't good that prevailed, it was evil that destroyed itself. I think Star Wars has a little bit more to say about that. Both great films and film series. The other one I might say is probably Serenity of the Firefly series. That's also about sticking to your principles, really. There's a line that says, "I don't care what you believe, just believe it." And it's about knowing who you are and sticking to that. And it's not really about believe any random thing. It's just like find something you care about and don't be cynical and just move from one thing to another. Stand for something. And that battle will kind of play out along the lines of, whoever's right is going to win out, because if you're standing by bad principles, then it's not going to work out for you in the end. It's self-defeating. So the agent of the corrupt fascist empire he's like, I don't care. He's like Peacemaker. I don't care how many men, women, and children I have to kill in order for peace. And he believes that 100%, to the point where he's literally says, I'm a monster. I'm not going to live in the new world that I'm creating free of sin. He sells his soul to create a greater good. And yet that is precisely the downfall of his beliefs, because it turns out that this government, the space government has created zombies. Basically, they tried to brainwash out Thanks. They tried to brainwash out dissidents and uppityness. They tried to brainwash out dissidents and uppityness and dissent, basically, from the population by giving them drugs that would make them like tranquil and obedient. And it made the majority of them so docile that they just laid down and died. And the rest of them just went completely opposite mad. They became space pirate, zombie, cannibal, crazy people, and called the Ravagers. And it was this government trying to control everything that made everything go out of control. And Mal, the main character, previously had lost his faith. He's just like, I'm just going to survive. Not have any principles, and in the end he finds something worth sacrificing himself. So he's sacrificing his survival for the truth. He finds out the truth of the Ravagers, and he basically forces the agent, the bad guy, to witness the downfall of his own principles, and the agent kind of lets him go in the end. So I guess there's a common theme there between all my favorite movies. Favorite TV show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's just a delight. And it really treads a lot of the same themes, I would say. If you grow too big for your britches, you're going to have some people come after you. If you abuse your son, he's going to change sides and help the Avatar defeat you. Stuff like that. And it's just a joy and a journey, and the show never gets old. It's family friendly, and it's quintessential adventure. It's hilarious. It's cool. Got some cool action. Yeah, that's my answer.
Contingency arguments for God's existence can be framed in a number of ways, obviously, but pick one, and what's your favorite response to this sort of contingency argument? Or if you're really ambitious, what's your favorite response to contingency arguments in general?
I don't know why it has to be favorite. So contingency arguments are kind of dumb because you can just pick anything at random to be the non-contingent being. There's no reason why God has to be the non-contingent being. They just kind of decide that God's going to be the non-contingent being. The cause is everything because that's in his definition. Therefore, it's true. So you can't just define things into existence, first of all. But the other thing is, if that's true, I can just do that with anything. I can just say, well, the universe has this property of non-contingency. So we've gotten nowhere. The other thing about God being a non-contingent being is he's a mind, and minds are the interactions between different properties and different parts inherently. And so and there has to be something that God's mind is based upon, or else it has no rules and it's just random noise. So it's impossible for God to be a non-contingent being. It's just not possible. He has to be made of simpler parts. And so I think contingency arguments are really, really weak because they're based on fallacies and they can be turned around on the theist very easily. It's much easier to say that matter just exists than it is to say an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-thinking, creative being just exists for no reason whatsoever. There's less to account for. And matter itself is just fluctuations in space, the space-time field, and it's much easier to just account for why there is something, because absolute nothingness is apparently impossible. So possibility just exists, and different possibilities interact with each other, and then order emerges out of what interactions are stable and what aren't.
Your understanding of Christianity, what does it take for a person to become a Christian and experience everlasting life?
Well, nothing. You can't experience everlasting life, in my view. There'd be nothing better, in my view. So I have a cognitive bias towards Christianity or anything that gives me everlasting life, but I still don't believe it. I don't just believe what I want. I'm not just an atheist because I want to sin. You know what I want more than I want to sin is to live forever. So why aren't I a Christian? Oh, because my ultimate principle is I'm not going to believe something if there's no evidence, even if I want to. Even if I want it to be true. So, what does it take for a Christian to become a Christian and experience everlasting life? You can't, but it takes as little as a hallucination or a delusion to make someone believe anything. So it could take as little as literally a hallucination or a dream where there's a coincidence. And so, and the fact that you can't convince people, you can't falsify these convictions makes it really untrustworthy. It should take rigorous scientific proofs or demonstrations for someone to believe in Christianity. What would it take for them to experience everlasting life? For them to die and go to heaven? But that kind of shows how evil your religion is. If people who don't believe that they're going to heaven just won't go to heaven because they didn't believe the right thing. So stupid. So, I don't even understand the point of this question. What does it take? It takes almost nothing. You could believe it because you're brainwashed into it. You could believe it because you had a sleep paralysis vision. Maybe you took too much mushrooms. Maybe you had a grief-induced hallucination. Maybe you just really, really want it to be true.
Whether you think anything in the Bible is true or not, do you think that the Bible or any passage in the Bible seems to teach eternal conscious suffering in hell? Maybe you think it teaches universal ultimate salvation or annihilation, the idea that people will no longer be conscious but will be annihilated and no longer have a conscious experience of anything. And I should say, I'm partly asking that question because a friend of mine, Chris Date at Rethinking Hell, would be happy to have a discussion or a debate on the subject of whether any Bible passage teaches eternal conscious torment.
Well, it certainly seems to imply that, doesn't it? Let's take a look at the handy-dandy Bible I got here, which I have read in high school, academically passed tests on, then I bought my own, and I read it again, highlighted it, bookmarked it, all kinds of things, so I know exactly what I'm looking for. There's a passage, Matthew 26, in which it says, basically, it talks about, when have you seen, Jesus is saying, when have you seen me in prison without clothes, naked, without food, and when have you helped me? And they're like, we've never seen that. And he says, the least among us, anyone you see who has done that and you refuse to help them, you've done it to me as well. And he says, those of you who do that will go off to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So the Bible explicitly says eternal punishment, and you can spin it to say that permanent death, annihilation, is eternal punishment. However, you then couldn't distinguish that from actual eternal punishment, which would be conscious punishment. because you're not being punished when you're dead. Technically, you've just been punished with death, and then it's over. Which, don't get me wrong, that's really bad, and it's permanent. But you're gone. I don't think you can argue that that's not eternal conscious suffering when you say eternal punishment. But I want to comment on this idea that if you ignore the least among us and you don't feed and clothe them, you've done this to Jesus as well. Well, that's a nice sentiment. That's actually a fairly deep sentiment, and I appreciate it. But Christians don't really believe it, do they? Because if I don't believe Jesus is God, then I will be sent to hell with... Reminds me of another passage. The cowards, the unfaithful, the depraved, the murderers, the unchaste, sorcerers, idol worshippers, deceivers of every sort, they're all grouped into the same group as unbelievers, who are going to... Their lot is the burning pool of fire and sulfur, which is the second death, which was made for Satan and his angels. So, or what passage is that? Revelation 21. It's in Revelation 21. Yeah, so because I don't have the correct opinion at the time of my death, I'm the same as a murderer, and so as far as that passage earlier in Matthew, where Jesus is saying, the way you treat the least among you is the way that you treat me, that's bullshit. Because God treats the least humans in a terrible way. They're devoid of the knowledge of apparently the truth. Not really their fault. Because if you don't believe in something, you just haven't really been shown. You haven't been convinced. It's not my fault that God is hidden. Worst case scenario, pretending Christianity is true. Yeah. I'm just mistaken. I have a poverty in knowledge. And so God's going to take me, the least among us, and because I'm poor in knowledge, He's going to throw me in hell. And so therefore, He's also doing that to Jesus. He's throwing Jesus in hell by implication. That's why I say Christians don't really believe that. Because there's this massive red flag of a charlatan there. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, you're going to suffer in hell. That's exactly what a charlatan would say. Imagine if I said that about anything else. If you don't get the jab, then you're going to hell. Imagine that. A lot of leftists do kind of believe that, actually. And you should be very mad at those people. Anyway.
What do you think is the most dangerous or problematic issue that theologically conservative Christians hold to? And I'm talking about an...
Okay. Why are you holding this to theologically conservative Christians? Exactly. This is why I think he's a fundamentalist. It doesn't really matter what the most dangerous, whether it's fundamentalist or conservative or liberal Christians, the most dangerous issue that Christians hold is belief in God. Why? because it's faith. If you hold faith, you are a dangerous person. You are a person who can be manipulated. And especially if you hold religious faith, faith in anything really, faith in the government, faith in God, all you have to be told is the government wants this, and you'll do it. All you have to be told is God wants this, and you'll do it. You have no choice if you have faith in that thing. You have no way of arguing with it. You have no way of knowing whether you've been lied to by your government or by your priests. As long as they convince you that X is from God, you will do it. You will agree to it. And that is the most dangerous thing that can happen, ever.
An issue or a position, not a person, a movement, or a party. Well, that's the list for 2021. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video, and I sure hope you will respond in the comments or make your own video in response. I'd love to hear what you have to say because I genuinely want the answers to these questions. Thanks for showing up, and I'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.
All right. I mean, he's probably a nice enough dude. Whatever. And I don't mean to come across as combative with him, but this is your brain on Christianity. You are super smug about things that you can't prove or demonstrate at all, and you can't understand why people don't just jump on your weird conspiracy. And yes, it is a conspiracy. God is conspiring all of this. He knows how to convince me. He knows exactly what would convince me. He knows the standard of evidence. He knows the scientific standard of evidence, and yet he will not provide it. Even if my standard is so high, that is higher than the standard of scientific evidence, he knows exactly what's going to convince me, and he doesn't care enough. He doesn't love me enough to move a finger. No, instead, he puts all the responsibility on my apparently inadequate, incompetent self. Meanwhile, he has all the power, but me, the flawed being who he made flawed, I have all the responsibility to act perfectly and believe the right thing. Here's a good example of how unforgiving and just a terrible person the Christian God is. Glenn Greenwald is a reporter who he broke the Edward Snowden stuff, and he helped out Chelsea Manning and won awards for reporting on her conditions in prison. She leaked some stuff to Julian Assange. And recently she came out and made some really vague accusations against Glenn Greenwald that, just really vague. He terrifies her. She doesn't want to be around him. Stuff like that. And getting interviewed about this, Glenn said that he still describes her as an American hero. Principally, she completely abandoned him and lost faith in him. Really sad. When he was there, he was the only reporter. One of the only ones. And certainly the main one, standing up for her after she did what she did heroically and was put in prison for exposing war crimes and really bad prison conditions. And Glenn was one of her only defenders, and he went and visited her in prison at great personal risk to himself for being arrested for similar crimes. And he spent hundreds of hours there. He gave her thousands of dollars so that she could use the phone. And and have money for when she got out of prison and for her legal defense funds. And yet she has completely abandoned him, and he still has faith in and compliments and wishes well for her. That is a mature person. Glenn Greenwald has more maturity, more humanity, more godliness than the Christian God does. More forgiveness than the God who is supposedly known for forgiveness, but cannot forgive the one unforgivable sin of not believing in him. So, the fact that us humans can find it in our hearts to forgive and wish salvation for other humans who have betrayed and lost faith in us, but your God can't do that? Can't even show them the better way just because they died in that state? That is unforgivable. But even then, I still wouldn't send your God to hell. See, if Braxton asked me my favorite book, I would say 1984. And you know what the irony is? I think I actually saw a clip from him saying 1984 is his favorite book. And I'm not just picking that because I just remembered that. That's been my favorite book since I read it in high school, because it's all about thought crimes, controlling thoughts through the language. And that's exactly what your God does. It's despicable. It's the height of evil. I can hardly think of a more evil being than the Christian God. Which is why some of the early Christian sects believe that Jesus was a different God than the God of the Old Testament. That the Old Testament Yahweh was a demiurge, which was an incomplete, partial part of the true God, and thus he was flawed, and he made the material world and everything, and Jesus is the true avatar of this light God, or God of light, or enlightenment, or whatever. And he sent Jesus as a way to escape the material world and rejoin the true God. That is an effective theology against the problem of evil. Yet it still kind of doesn't address why you have to follow Jesus. I've talked to a few people now about how following the spirit of Jesus makes sense as a salvific act or belief, because if you're following the spirit of Jesus, you're basically following the spirit of rebellion and questioning authority, which is ironic, but that's kind of what he represents in general. And that's what will free your mind. And it's ironic because you have to be able to question the God. You have to, or else you're admitting that an evil God can trick you into doing anything. And that's not acceptable to me. It'll never be, no threat of hell will ever be as much as the threat of becoming a minion of a false god, an evil god, or a false prophet. And that's just the truth. You can't argue with it. And if you'd like to, well, let's talk about it. Okay, guys, well, that's it for today. that'll be my first Fundie Sunday. All right. Peace. Dog bless.